it could lead to somebody being treated with medication that could cause potential side effects for them. Think about the money, etc. So there are consequences to giving a wrong blood pressure number. So accuracy, if you don't know, tell somebody. When we define blood pressure, it actually means the force of the blood on the arteries, the pressure exerted on the arteries as the heart is pumping the blood through the body. And we get two different measurements. The first measurement that we get is the systolic pressure. It's the first thing that we hear, the first sound that we hear. And the last sound that we hear is called the diastolic pressure. And that's how come we get to write it as a fraction. For example, if the first number that we hear, the gauge is pointing at 120, that's what we record. If the last sound that we hear is at 80, we record that as the denominator, the number on the bottom. And the unit of measurement is millimeters of mercury. Even though we don't use mercury blood pressure cuffs anymore, we still use the measurement as millimeters of mercury. So what exactly are you hearing? The first sound that you hear is when the heart is working. It's the contraction phase of the heart. The second sound that you hear is the heart going into rest, which is one reason why when the bottom number of the blood pressure is really high, we get concerned, because that's when the heart is supposed to be resting. All right. Whenever we take a blood pressure, we have to use a stethoscope. Now, this is an example of a teaching stethoscope. Most stethoscopes that you see are not going to have multiple sets of earpieces and tubes. Okay? So, we're just going to stick this one up here on my neck for the time being. These are your earpieces right here. You want to always clean these with alcohol to sanitize them before you put them in your ear, and they point toward your patient. This part is called the tubing. And you want to keep this clean too, but you don't want to use alcohol on that because alcohol will dry that out. So if you clean this off, just use soap and water. Some people will spray Pledge or something on a towel and wipe that off. And if you hang this in your car over your rearview mirror, it will dry out and crack, so don't ever do that. As we go on down, this is called the chest piece, and this particular stethoscope has two sides. This is the side that we use. This is the diaphragm. This is the side that we use when we auscultate. Auscultate is a fancy word for listening. This is the side that we use when we're listening for blood pressure. This is called the bell. And we don't use this a whole lot. I've seen a lot of pediatricians use this side because it picks up more high-pitched noises. So this one will actually turn. So when you put the earpieces into your ear, you're going to want to gently tap on this to make sure that you have it turned the right way, because if you don't, I'm sure Ashley can attest that you can't hear a thing, can you, Ashley? If it's not turned the right way, you're not going to hear anything. This is also a stethoscope, a teaching stethoscope. I'm making a mess here. But you can see that it only has the diaphragm side, so they are made a little bit differently sometimes, but they function in exactly the same way. All right. So when we choose a blood pressure cuff, this is a normal-sized blood pressure cuff right here for a normal adult arm. But they come in lots of different sizes. They have pediatric cuffs for babies that are born prematurely, all the way up to people that are obese and weigh 600 pounds. Sometimes we have to take blood pressures on people who've had bilateral mastectomies, which both breasts are removed, so they can't take a blood pressure on their arms. So we have them big enough to go around the thigh or the calf. So you can go from itty-bitty to very, very, very large. And you have to have the right size cuff, because if it's too big, you're not going to get a correct reading. And if it's too small, you're not going to get a correct reading. So it's very important to have the right size. This is what we call an aneroid manometer. This device right here is called a manometer. That just means it's a meter, okay? And it's aneroid because it's manual. We're manually going to check the blood pressure cuff. Sometimes you'll see digital blood pressure cuffs, like on the machine that we have back there in the back. Can you hit pause for just 1 second? Are we going? Mm-hmm. Thank you so very much. All right. So this is just an aneroid manometer. That picture up there actually has a built-in stethoscope, which you'll see that sometimes, but this one doesn't have the built-in stethoscope. So the part of the sphygmomanometer, the whole thing together is called a sphygmomanometer. All right. So of course we have the manometer, or the device here with the gauge. We have this valve right here. This is going to be the very hardest thing for you to learn. how to use whenever you check somebody's blood pressure. Every class that I teach consistently, they have more trouble learning how to adjust this gauge. So whenever we practice it, I'm going to teach you, didn't I? Whenever you pump it up, turn it clockwise. Whenever you let it out, turn it counterclockwise. And has everybody had their blood pressure taken before? Yeah. So whenever you do it, no? All right. Whenever you get your blood pressure taken, if they turn it and let that air out really, 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 really fast, like psst, they're not hearing anything, okay? You have to let the air out of this slowly at about 2 to 4 millimeters per second before you actually can get a good reading, for you to be able to hear it. If you let it out too fast, then it's not good. How long have we been going?
About 8 minutes.
About 8 minutes? Okay. This is a video, and I'm not going to show you the video for purposes of the fact that I'm being recorded right now, because it's about a 10-minute video, and it would take up my whole presentation. But it's an excellent video, and what it does is it explains exactly how to take blood pressure, and then it gives you some practice sessions, all right? But for the sake of time, I'm going to ask for a volunteer to come up and let me do an actual demonstration on how to check blood pressure. And these are the steps. All right, Miss Chloe May, come on up. Chloe, I need you to have a seat here, relax your feet on the floor, slide one arm out of your sleeve for me. Okay? And we're going to say that Miss Ryan has sanitized her hands. I have gathered my supplies. All right. Chloe, I'm going to let you just hold this part for me for just a moment. I am going to sanitize my earpieces with some alcohol. And looking at Chloe's arm, I can see that she has pretty much got a normal sized arm. I'm also going to sanitize my diaphragm. I'm just going to hold this right here and let her hold that with that hand. I'm going to ask Chloe to extend her arm out. I am going to locate her brachial pulse. And her brachial pulse, if we go on the pinky side of the arm and just follow it up right here to the bend of the arm, which we call the cubital fossa, with 2 fingers flat, I can palpate her pulse, so I know exactly where I want to place my blood pressure cuff and my stethoscope. So when I open my blood pressure cuff up, you will see right here it says artery mark. I want to put that line directly over where I palpated her brachial pulse, and I want to put this on tight enough so that if she holds her arm down to her side, it's not going to slide off, okay? Now, I don't know what Chloe's normal blood pressure reading is. If I did, whenever I pump my gauge up, I would go about 20 millimeters of mercury higher than what her normal blood pressure is. But since I don't know what that is, about 160 millimeters of mercury is typically good for someone who's young and healthy. Put my earpieces in, facing her. With my non-dominant hand, I'm going to hold my diaphragm. I'm not going to put my thumb on it because I have a pulse in my thumb. I don't want to hear my own pulse. I'm going to ask her once again to extend her arm, and I kind of like to do it right here. I'm going to hold this in place. Got to make sure that you can see the gauge at the same time. I'm going to pump up to about 160 millimeters of mercury and let out slowly. Once I hear my last sound, I'm going to let all the air out. I'm going to go ahead and take this off. Thank you. Set my supplies down, and I'm going to record her blood pressure. And it read 108/60 millimeters of mercury, which is excellent. Are we at 10 minutes? Thank you, Ms. Cole. You can stop.